Do you really believe your father was murdered?
I
You grew up in Osaka, Japan, right?
right.
And your father, instead of bedtime stories, would tell you about murders, sexual assault cases.
So he took me to Ted Bundy's house in 1979. I was kidnapped in 1980.
Were you kidnapped from America or Japan?
From Japan. I was born in Japan, but when my parents got divorced, my mom kidnapped myself and my younger brother in 1980.
Why are you so obsessed with crime and murder?
Well, I think some kids have a connection with their dads playing baseball or maybe watching movies, but that's something what my dad was interested in, and so it's one of the few intimate things I used to do with my dad. But let's be honest, murder is also one of the most intimate thing you could do to someone, and
Is it intimate when somebody, like a mass shooting? Do you believe that's intimate?
I think it's more intimate when you're strangling somebody, like some of the big serial killers that have been covered in the States.
Right.
But I think my dad had a morbid sense of humor because you kind of have to when you're ethnically Korean growing up in Japan. Things are so bad for them.
After you're kidnapped, any communication with your father?
No, not really, because my cousin and relative told me that my dad didn't want us, and that's why they brought it. But I didn't realize until 5 years later that was a lie.
How long after that did your father die?
He died in summer of 2003. Yeah. So, so January of 2003, I reconnect. I went to see my dad again. And I didn't see my dad for like 10 years. I flew back because the whole time my stepmother was having an affair with somebody else, and took advantage of my dad. So my dad was left with tons of debt, and he didn't know how to deal with the whole situation. And I was really angry with him because he tolerate people treat him bad. You have to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And looking back, I was really wrong because some people are not able to defend themselves. The reality is, I, on the other hand, is just like my mother, and my mother is a very violent person. So, well, I talked about it in Joe Rogan stuff, but I don't mind because you don't know, so it's probably. So when my dad died, August of 2003, I got an email from my cousin. He just wrote two words in my email: "Papa dead." That's how they notify him the fact that my dad died, and they found my dad's body, and he was hanging from ceiling for like so long that he looked like one of the Marvel character. We couldn't figure out if this was suicide or murder, because that same night my stepmother and her family flew in from Korea to Japan. Now, it could be circumstantial, but she did all kinds of terrible things. Either led him to commit suicide or she has something to do with the murder. I think a lot of times when somebody murders someone in Japan, they make it look like it's a suicide, and the police do not do any sort of like investigation, autopsy.
Right.
So we went to funeral, and um, my it's the middle of nowhere. It's like the cemetery is some mountainous area. And I saw my stepmother, and of course my aunt said terrible things, and like, "You fucking killed my brother." And as soon as she left, I was so shocked that my stepmother by herself, because she doesn't know my reputation. So I ended up, I didn't plan to do it, but I ended up beating her up to the point where I almost killed her. And I stopped beating her when I heard somebody working at the cemetery scream, because I blacked out. I was literally beating her up. And after that, I just ran out of there. And I assaulted my stepmother's nephew, sister, and brother-in-law. And then I took off. And
And you did this because you suspected she murdered your
either
father.
she murdered my dad, or did so many terrible things to led him to commit suicide.
Yeah.
So
Let me
best
ask,
scenario, he killed himself. The worst scenario, that she killed him.
and do you have any qualms or apprehensions about admitting that you beat up a woman? Does that
No.
concern you? No. And why is that?
Um,
Because it made me, I got that uncomfortable feeling, and
yeah, I I think maybe that's just growing up in Japan and Asia. But I think um, I don't know. My couple of my friends said maybe that's my Korean blood or whatever. But the whole revenge culture. I think some culture are famous for that. Like Italians are like kind of famous for that. Only reason I technically got away because I did that in another country. I don't live there anymore.
Yeah.
If I did something like that here, I'll be serving quite a long time because I assaulted 4 people.
Right.
And
Do you worry about retribution or them revenging you?
they were more afraid of me than trying to do something to me.
Was it uncontrollable rage? Like you blacked out? Were you conscious? Was this sort of like, I'm going to hit you now and hit you now and hit you now? Could you have stopped yourself? Would you have beaten one of them to death if you could have?
I was a little surprised myself because flying back, I was really angry. I mean, I was angry with her, but I was also angry with my dad allowing her to treat him like that. Because the more you let somebody treat like that, it can escalate to the point where they keep doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing.
So is there shame
Yeah, sure.
that your dad allowed that?
Yes, I don't really like that.
I'm fascinated by
Yeah.
your openness and what you've been through, because I'll be honest with you, when you sent all this information ahead of time, I said, this can't be real, but I'm looking at you, you're 2 feet away from me.
Yeah.
I'm praying that you don't punch me.
No,
And
no.
yeah.
I have a high tolerance, like when people are misbehaving and stuff. It just,
But I can
anything to do with your families and friends, you're very sensitive about that. You know? And I didn't. It's really difficult to reconcile because on one hand, I'm mad at my dad for letting people treat him like that. But years later, I realized not everyone is able to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's hard for me to admit.
I don't know any of the circumstances, but is it possible that your father did kill himself, but you want to believe that he was murdered so it takes away some of the shame?
I think there's some truth in that. Yeah. I mean, do I know for sure? No, I really don't.
Do you feel that people look at you and think, I bet he's murdered somebody?
Sometimes people say stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think Oscar Wilde said that if you want to tell people truth, do it. If you could make people laugh while you're telling them, you could get away with that. But if you don't make them laugh, you're in danger